Hello, you may have seen my video yesterday where I did a deep dive into the cause of the lack of deceleration. That sounds quite good, isn't it? And at the end of the video I said, why would you basically want to be able to accelerate while you're braking? Wouldn't it be a good idea? If you can turn that off, well, guess what? You can. It's already in the firmware. A guy called Kenneth got in touch from my Facebook post. Thank you very much, Kenneth, for alerting me to this. And it's quite well hidden, but there's a feature within the ECU. In fact, there's two. There's one where you can put a limit to reduce fuel and basically protect the driver that way. And there's another one where you can do a trip. Let's look at the limiters first of all. So we've got brake and throttle cut under limiters, and if we look in here, we've got drive braking pressure brake points, which is 0 to 100, and that's driver brake pressure (BPD). We've also got throttle position brake points, and we've then got things like minimum engine speed, minimum vehicle speed, and then look, we've got a nice table. Let's go into that. I've basically put some values in it just so we can have a bit of a play. I'm just going to zero it all out because that's how it comes from the factory. Yeah, so basically it's all zero, so it's not going to cut any fuel if I press the throttle when I'm braking, and I want it to. So in this case, what we would set up here is the brake pressure, and it's the combination of front and rear brake pressure, which gives you BPD, and it's against the throttle pedal. So we might want to say at any point, if I press the throttle while I'm braking and the brake pressure is above 30 bar, cut the fuel. So we'll put 100 in. There you go. That's going to cut the fuel 100%. And then what we can do down here is we can just interpolate the data by doing a maths interpolate x. Yeah, it's got a nice slope now. There you go. Done. That's it. Done. How long did that take? That would have saved me having my accident at Mallory Park. So with that saved and then flashed into the ECU is going to basically say if the brake pressure is above 30 bar and the throttle is pressed anywhere from 10 to 100%, cut the fuel 100%. So it's like when you're driving your road car and you've got someone tailgating you and you just touch your left foot on the brake pedal just to put the brake lights on. On some cars the car will suddenly decelerate, and that's the ECU cutting the fuel, because it's seeing you braking and accelerating at the same time. And other cars don't do that. And in my case, I would like it to do that. I'd like it to decelerate to let me know, oi, you've got your foot on the throttle and on the brake pedal at the same time. So that's one way of doing it. You can also, like I said, you can set a minimum vehicle speed. You might want to be able to warm the brakes up as you're driving around the paddock. So you might want to be able to press throttle and brake. So you might want to say put in 15 mile an hour minimum speed. So anything below that you can do what you like. And the same for engine speed. You might say I only want it to work above, say, 3000 RPM. So you just put that in there, and then you do a program, and away you go. The other way to do it is through engine trips. The engine trips are a bit harsher. It'll actually cut the engine power completely if this situation occurs. And it's actually enabled. It's enabled in all the calibration settings that I've got, and that means that it is actually operating. However, it's not set up. And if we go into sensors, define sensors and trip setups, brake pressure, brake and throttle engine trip, we can actually set up a similar operation to how we set up the limiters. We can put a brake pressure threshold, we can put a throttle position threshold in, manifold pressure threshold, that must be a default 5000 millibars, far higher than I run. You can then put in a fuel cut severity, how long you want it to trip for, how long it waits before the trip is enabled after the engine started, which is 2 seconds, which is the default of most of the trips, probably all of the trips. How many trips are allowed? So you could say, well, I want to allow it 10 times, but this is currently set to 0. And also trip on brake sensor fault. So if it can't read the brake pressure, if it can't work out what the brake pressure is from the front and the rear combined, which is summed, then it'll trip the engine as a failsafe. So you can do it that way. If you want to do it that way, you can do it that way. It's enabled. It's just, like I say, the limiter and the trip have never been set up before. It's just how the ECUs came. They were raced professionally for 2 years in the Formula 4 Championship, and it was a feature they probably thought, well, why would we want to enable that? So they just set to 0, or it could just be it's come along in a firmware update as a new feature, and so it doesn't interfere with your driving experience. They've just set it all to 0. So it's there, it's just not doing anything. So yeah, so we've learned quite a bit from that tip off from this guy, Kenneth. Thank you very much for telling me about that. I will set it up. I will set it up probably in limiters. I'd rather have a limiter than a trip. I'll set it up along those lines, something like that anyway, and then we'll have a play, drive in a straight line, press the throttle while I'm braking and see what it does. And it should cut off fuel 100%. You just don't want it accelerating at all, because you're braking, you're trying to slow down. Are there any implications from doing it like this? I don't know yet. Will it affect possibly the auto blip on the downshift, anti-lag, all sorts of stuff? Again, why would you be braking and accelerating? So theoretically, no, it shouldn't cause any problems. But when the car is back out later in the year, we will set this up, test it, and make sure it's working properly, just to make the car safer to drive. That's the overriding factor at the moment. It's a phenomenal piece of kit, but it just shows how very easy it is for any race car to get yourself into difficulty without you even realising it. So anyway, lesson there. Thanks, Kenneth. Hopefully you found that useful. If you did, please like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos.